And now, a warrior for the Word of God and the Constitution of the United States, a Marine Corps veteran, a Harvard-trained attorney, Bishop of the Called Churches, and founder and president of STAND. Staying true to America's national destiny, the voice of the awakening. Your host, Bishop E.W. Jackson.
Thank you so much for listening to The Awakening on American Family Radio. Obviously, I am not Bishop E.W. Jackson. I'm Meeke Addison, normally co-hosting Airing the Addisons with Will the Great. And I'm filling in for Bishop E.W. as he travels. And as any good warrior would be, he is on the front lines. And so from time to time, that takes him away. And I'm happy to be filling in for him today. I've just got one basic topic that I wanted to discuss, and I wanted to kind of implore our listeners to consider and to do a little bit of extra research. You know, usually in 1 hour when we're doing radio programs, we can only scratch the surface in talking about what some of the issues of the day really are. And then, you know, the rest of it is really up to you, the listener, to do a little bit more digging and to decide, you know, how you can engage with the information. But I was really struck by something that I was kind of researching and looking into, and wanted to bring it to your attention, just because I think that there are so many ways that we overlook the way that wickedness proliferates in our culture. It's sort of always happening right under our noses, but we tend to be sniffing in like just the direction, like, you know, south of it or north of it or left of it or right of it or whatever. We're just like not right there. And so the conversation that I wanted to have was the financing of wickedness, what we as, yes, Americans, but what we as Christians, followers of the Lord Jesus Christ, what we have to understand about the great cunning of our common enemy and about the way that he works. And sometimes these things are just right under the radar. You know, we are fighting battles, and in some cases we're winning. Some cases we're winning battles. In other cases, we have left ourselves open in other areas. While we're fighting in one place, we think that this is the best place for us to be positioned. But then we find ourselves kind of left open in this unoccupied space or this unoccupied territory. And so basically what I want to do today, as I fill in for Bishop E.W. Jackson, is I want to call the body of Christ to be vigilant, to be prayerful, and above all, to be discerning. When you're discerning, right, you have the opportunity to know some things that you would not otherwise know, right? The Holy Spirit allows us to be wise in all of our engagement. And again, which would make it necessary that he indwells us. That's not a luxury. That's a necessity for a Christian. Like you have to operate according to the wisdom that is given to you by the Spirit of God. So again, we're talking today about the financing of wickedness. I'm going to take my time and kind of go through some information, and hopefully by the end of the program, there'll be some connections that will have been made that what I ultimately hope will serve to rally Christians, to call us to prayer, to call us to greater vigilance in protecting our children, to understanding what really is happening daily in this country, even when we can't see it, when it doesn't make big news headlines. These things are still going on. And so come go with me here. And I'm going to give a little bit of background here. But as I think you'll see, as we get through this background is all necessary. So it's not, although for a second, it might sound like it turns into sort of like a tabloid, segment, but the background is indeed necessary. So last June, Jeff Bezos, who is currently the world's richest man, with a net worth of $178 billion, okay, billion with a B. Last June, as a result of infidelity and all kinds of other things, he and his wife, Mackenzie, divorced, right? So as a result of this divorce, this billionaire couple turned into billionaire individuals. Okay. So the divorce settlement last year became the world's biggest when Jeff Bezos, had to hand over a 4% stake in Amazon to his wife, Mackenzie. All right. This stake, or these shares, were at the time worth $38 billion with Again, a B, $38 billion. Okay. Now, just incidentally, it's at 60 billion because it's been a good year for Amazon. All right. If you are following the headlines and reading Business Insider and things like that, it's been a good year for Amazon. It's been a good year for Jeff Bezos. It's also been a good year for his ex-wife, Mackenzie. So anyways, this became and still is by far the largest divorce settlement in history. Before this $38 billion settlement at the time, which is now worth $60 billion. Before this settlement, there was some art dealer who divorced his wife in 1999 and paid her $2.5 billion with the B. And that was huge. But then along come the Bezos and you get $38 billion with the B. Here's the bottom line. Mackenzie Bezos, who now goes by the last name Scott, which she took from her middle name, I think, if I'm understanding where she's coming from here. Mackenzie Bezos became the world's fourth richest woman as a result of this divorce settlement and the world's 13th richest person. Now, last year, I remember reading about this and finding this all very interesting because it's one of those things where, Amazon is a ginormous company. And so these things tend to make headlines. But what Mackenzie, now Scott, so I will call her Mackenzie Scott, that's the name she's going by. Mackenzie Scott pledged to give away at least half of her then $38 billion fortune. All right. Now, trek with me here. It's now worth $60 billion. Okay. But at the time, she pledged to give away half of her fortune. She said that she had, quote, a disproportionate amount of money to share and said that she was going to work hard until the safe is empty. And that's a direct quote, until the safe is empty. All right. And so basically what she did was join the Giving Pledge. You remember this? This is where all of the, I guess, nation and I guess you could say world's wealthiest took this pledge to give away a lot of their money. This Giving Pledge, this philanthropic initiative was created by Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, which again, you might already imagine where I'm going with this when I mention those names. All right. So this pledge was, again, for the world's richest people to commit to giving away at least half of their wealth to charity. Now, what's the point to all of this seemingly irrelevant information? Well, at the end of last month, Mackenzie Scott was ready to announce so far, where her money is going. And by the way, and I don't want to get too far ahead of the discussion here, she will continue to update the public as to where the money is going, because that's sort of like the thing to do. If you have wealth and you have quote unquote privilege, you don't just give anonymously, you give so that you are virtuous and that it is evident to everyone, right? So what Mackenzie Scott has to do is she has to give publicly so that people see. It's virtue signaling. That's what it is. It's Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and all of the world's wealthiest getting together to decide that, yes, we're wealthy, but we're not that kind of wealthy, meaning that we're not the wealthy that you should hate. We are those who have committed to denying ourselves half of our riches. OK, which, again, if you're looking at 60 billion, giving away half of that, you're still a billionaire, which is fine. I mean, I'm not, no one's knocking the fact that these people have this money. The question that we should be asking, and this is the scope of what I want to discuss today, is where is the money going? Where is the money going? And that is what we're going to take a look at. This is The Awakening. I'm Meeke Addison, in for Bishop E.W. Jackson. Welcome back to The Awakening on American Family Radio. I'm Meeke Addison, in for Bishop E.W. Jackson. And today our discussion is looking at the financing of wickedness in this country and how these resources that are being spread about, which really becomes an attempt to virtue signal, to say, I'm a good person. Look at what I'm doing for the people. And basically it becomes almost sort of like the giving becomes a sign in the window, right? The giving becomes sort of the, don't attack me. I'm with you. I'm on your side. I'm doing this. And look, and it's probably not fair for me to paint with such a broad brush because, you have people like Mackenzie Scott, who is the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, who last year was paid $38 billion as the result of a divorce settlement. She received a 4% stake in Amazon. Well, Amazon had a great year. That $38 billion is now worth $60 billion. At the time, she took the Giving Pledge. All right. She became a part of this initiative started by Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, which, again, to me becomes an immediate dead giveaway as to, what types of initiatives will be invested in and what types of programs will be given to. Yes, they're charities, but they have an ideological bent. Okay, they have a direction that these organizations are going in, and these people have committed huge sums of money to give toward those ideologies. So we're talking about Mackenzie Scott, as she is known now, because she recently on the website, The Medium, or on the website Medium, she posted that she was ready to reveal what she had spent the last year working on, a collection of financial advisors and people who are well aware of different organizations that are doing the greatest good and places where she felt she could invest her money. All right. And so over at the Federalist, they've got a great piece where they look at some of the 116 nonprofit organizations that in the past year, Mackenzie Scott has given to. All right. So far, what she has given totals $1.7 billion. So if you're putting down the one and carrying the two and then dividing and then, regrouping and all of the other stuff that you do, then she's got a lot more money left to give because $60 billion is where she's at now. And she has taken a pledge to give away half of that. Now, people would say, Meeke, why do you care about that? Well, remember, the thrust of the conversation is the financing of wickedness. So we have to look at where this money is going. And I think it's so important that when you look at some of the organizations that we're going to discuss today, and even I'll take a look at before time is over, I'll take a look at what Mackenzie Scott, the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, okay, world's richest man, okay, founder of Amazon, look at what she said about why she's giving and why she chose the specific organizations that she chose to give to. Again, I don't think that we can overthink this. I think we have to be aware of what is happening, as I say, right under our noses and make sure that we turn our attention that way. And near the end of the program, I'll get to what that looks like, because I think there is a great need for some practical application here, not just talking about this information for talking about sake. But let me also say this. When you look at some of the organizations that Mackenzie Scott gave to over the past year, 116 nonprofit organizations, not all of them fall into the category that would, sort of garner the public's ire, where you're like, I don't know. Not all of them fall into that category, but many of them do. Okay. And we're going to talk about that. But I want to drive home this point on the front end of the discussion. When you look at how our culture continues to shift, and when you look at how our culture continues to change, you see that sometimes it doesn't matter how many political elections we win. Come on, think about it. It doesn't matter. You have to ask yourself the question, why is it that on the conservative end of this fight, it seems that we can win a little bit of ground here. It seems that we're moving forward, but the country continues to descend into this like moral abyss. Why is that happening? Because there are people who understand that, yes, it's important to win elections, but they know that what is of greater importance is to change ideologies, to shift culture, to change the way the culture thinks about issues of morality and the sanctity of life and human dignity. All of these things, which, by the way, those are not liberal code words, right? We have to understand that our understanding, a biblical understanding of human dignity and sexual morality and sexual identity. All of these things are given to the followers of Jesus Christ first. But because we have shied away from these things, they have been commandeered by the culture. The culture redefines them and then gives them back to us and says, now use them according to our definition. And unfortunately, we find ourselves doing this. That's a whole other topic. I say outright on its face, that's got to be rejected. The church has got to emphatically, without embarrassment, get back to biblical definitions to deal with what's happening in our country, not the definitions that have been given to us by the world. But here's the point that I'm making. We can continue to push for and see winning elections as the only way to change or to shift our country, or even by some definitions to save our nation, right? We can continue to look at only the politics. But if we do that, we do that at great loss, because there are people who understand that political investment is important, but ideological investment is of greater importance. Being able to influence the culture, the way people think, the way our children think. If that changes, and as you see, it already has, then the political wins are easier. The harder thing to do is to see a person's mind changed, right? So when there is a tremendous amount of giving that goes in that direction, changing minds, changing sentiments, then I don't really need to fund candidates. I mean, because if the candidate has the right ideological bent, if the candidate is saying the right things and people's minds have already been changed, if people's minds have already been, to quote the Apostle Paul from Romans, conformed to the patterns of this world, then the political wins are easy. So you can see that financing the spread of radical ideologies becomes way more important than giving money to candidates. Although, keep in mind, that still happens. So what am I saying here as we get into looking at some of these organizations that Mackenzie Scott chose to give to, right? What I'm saying is this. Many of us are very unaware that while we are feverishly working in one area, there are other areas that are left unguarded, right? And this is this is such an old saying that the chain is only as strong as its weakest link, right? I mean, that's true. Think about that. So if we are fighting battles in the culture and we've got areas of weakness where we are not giving our full attention, we are not fighting, then it doesn't matter how strong we are over here, right? Because you've got these breaches that are glaring, that are obvious in other areas. And that's what I want to shine a light on today. Remember, the discussion is the financing of wickedness in this country. And you've got people who have pledged, okay? They have pledged to give away at least half of their fortune, the world's richest, giving away at least half of their fortunes. And they're not given to what advances righteousness. They're not given to those things. They have an ideological bent that they have a vested interest in seeing those ideas, seeing those notions, seeing those ideologies proliferate. So now, Mackenzie Scott, okay, $1.7 billion over the last year, billion with a B, all right? I just want people to understand. 116 nonprofit organizations on the website Medium. She posted all of the organizations, listed all of the organizations with a little write-up. I'm going to share a little bit of that as well as to why she chose those organizations. I think it's very telling, and I think our listeners need to know about it. But here are some of the groups that Mackenzie Scott gave to that I think is so important for us to pay attention to. So she gave to the National Center for Lesbian Rights. This is a legal firm that recently represented a man, an inmate, who is serving time for the sexual abuse of a minor, but wanted to have a sex or gender reassignment surgery that was paid for by the state. This organization, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, this legal firm, represented this man in this case. And again, let me also highlight, he was successful in his attempt to get state-funded gender reassignment surgery while in prison. This same organization, again, this is on the list of the organizations that Mackenzie Scott, the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, gave to. She's got at least $30 billion to go through. She's only scratched the surface at 1.7 billion with a B. All right. This organization, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, again, which is a legal firm, also led a drafting and submission of testimony for a bill that would ban states from prohibiting abortion before a fetus is viable. That would ban states from prohibiting abortion before a fetus is viable. Now, if you think about that, in most cases, viability occurs, they say these days, 24 to 28 weeks. We're talking 6 to 7 months. This organization, Mackenzie Scott, gave to. What we are talking about is a deep-seated ideological shift that is happening daily in this country. We got to grab the break. This is The Awakening on American Family Radio. We'll be right back. I'm Meeke Addison, in for Bishop E.W. Jackson, and it's great to be with you. You're listening to The Awakening. Today, the discussion is the financing of wickedness, what we must understand. Listen, we have got to, many of us, on the front lines here in the body of Christ, we've got to play goalie. And there's not any goalie that's worth his or her salt that just stands in the middle of the goal there. You've got to be moving around, which means that there are all sorts of points of contact, right, that could present itself as a breach to what you're trying to stand guard against. And what I'm suggesting today is that, yes, there is a fight to be fought on the political front, but while we are doing that, please understand that there is an ideological fight that is taking place single day, and we can't check out from that. I'm talking, if you're just joining us, I'm talking about Mackenzie Scott, who is the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, who last year they were divorced as a result of Bezos' infidelity, by the way. And she was awarded a 4% stake in the Amazon company, which at the time was worth $38 billion. Why does Meeke keep wanting to say with a B? I just don't want people to miss it. Okay. I just want you to understand we're talking about a ginormous chunk of money. That $38 billion has grown to $60 billion. Okay. And Mackenzie Scott, as she goes by now, took the Giving Pledge. All right, which was to be a part of the philanthropic initiative that was started by Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. All right. And so what's that pledge? It's the world's wealthiest people getting together and saying, hey, we pledge to give at least half of our wealth away. Mackenzie Scott said she's going to give until the safe is empty. Right. And on the surface, you're like, Meeke, why do you care? Why is that a topic of conversation? Well, because she just recently announced who she's giving to. She just recently announced why she's giving to them. And that is where I think that's our point of interest, because we continue to win in some ways, making some political gains, right? Some, but our culture continues to decline. Why is that? We have to ask these questions. Why do there continue to be these ideological shifts? Because the wicked understand that it's not just political positions that they need to be after. It's the minds and the hearts of constituents. It's change the culture one person at a time, right? So they're fully invested in going where the people are so that the vote is easy. You're not just telling people, although some of them are, but you're not just telling people vote this way because I told you to. You're telling people this is how you should think on this issue. Here's your mind. Here's your heart. Here's your compassion. And now we have created the kind of culture where people are compelled to show that they have this hall pass, right? So we call it virtue signaling. Show us that you're good. Show us that you're good. Put the sign up in your window that says you're fit to be a part of this culture. And that happens in all kinds of different ways. I mean, sometimes they're actual literal signs, right? Like sometimes they're actual literal signs that people are putting up in their businesses, declaring whose lives matter and all of these things, literal signs that they're putting out in their yard, right? There are symbols that people are donning. There are things that they're putting on jerseys and putting on basketball courts, all of these things that are happening. And why? It's an attempt to virtue signal, to say, I'm good and I have a right to exist in the culture. And so what does the converse mean? The converse means that anybody who's not doing this does not have the right to exist in the culture. You're not fit to be today's definition of an American. That's not only happening at a political level. In fact, and let me say this, look, it's been said, and it's true, that politics is downstream from culture. So as the culture changes and shifts, so does the politics. But we have missed that. We have to understand that changing hearts and changing minds, number one, that is the work of the Lord Jesus Christ, which interstage right the gospel. That's why we need people to get the gospel. But then number two, there is a great need for discipleship so that people now understand how they live a life that is consistent with what they've professed. You've come to Christ. That is great. Now, how do you live it out? Now, what does that look like? Do you understand that people who hate God understand discipleship better than the followers of Jesus Christ? They understand discipleship. They understand training. And so that's why when you've got a woman, the world's fourth richest woman, Mackenzie Scott, formerly Mackenzie Bezos, all right? 13th now richest person. Her former husband is the world's richest. So when you've got Mackenzie Scott talking about where she's giving half of her 60 billion, you have to understand that what she understands is that we have got to change ideologies in this country. We've got to move culture along through people who understand how to do it. So recently, when she announced the 116 nonprofit organizations that she's so far given 1.7 billion to, and remember, she's got at least 30 billion to go through. She's going to empty the safe. This is why we should pay attention to where this money is going. I call it the financing of wickedness. But I want you to listen to the strategy that's involved in the organizations that have been selected. So she gave to GLSEN. Many people are familiar with GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, which has, by the way, developed school curricula to shape students' views on sexuality. GLSEN provides teachers with curriculum that tells elementary school children they're experiencing what is called cis privilege if they identify as a boy or a girl and have the accompanying traditionally masculine or feminine traits. This curriculum, developed by GLSEN, also encourages kids to explore their gender identity, teaching them that, quote, self-expression can be really fun, end quote, and asking them to consider how their gender expression changes from day to day. And then they get the curriculum into the schools. Mackenzie Scott giving to GLSEN as a part of her philanthropic initiatives. Remember, she's got 30 billion with a B to go through. She's only scratched the surface at 1.7. And why am I telling you this? Because while we turn our attention, we're looking at what is happening on the political front. And we must do that. We cannot neglect the other areas of this fence. We cannot neglect the other areas of the city that lie open and bare, which is ideological construct, the mind, the way the next generation, or let me say it this way, the way the generation that is now is thinking. We have missed it, but the wicked have not. Mackenzie Bezos releasing via Medium the organizations that she's given to so far, and she's not done yet. These are the organizations she's given to so far, and she's not done. The Fund for Trans Generations. The Fund for Trans Generations. This organization has provided grant money to a Black trans prayer book that collects the stories, poems, prayers, meditations, spells, and incantations of Black, trans, and non-binary people. Now, look, what does that have to do with, the benefit of the entire community? Like, what does that have, like, what does that have to do with it? Right? No, but the ideology is important, right? The sentiment is important. Who is driving this? I mean, I don't mean to sound, again, I'm also going back, like, I don't mean to sound like the church lady here, but it's like, could it be Satan? Like, who's behind this? Like, who's driving this? All right. That's the question that we have to ask. Now, listen, this organization, the Fund for Transgenerations, that, and as we'll see, I haven't even gotten to her actual letter. Mackenzie Scott, ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, said that she had a team of people help her pick these organizations. She had a team of people that were representative of the types of organizations she was interested in. So, a diverse team. Let's call it that, right? But by the world's current definition of diversity. This Fund for Transgenerations also notes in its funding priorities that the organization is open to considering funding projects to decriminalize prostitution. Why is Mackenzie Scott given to that? Because she knows what's at stake. We'll grab the break. This is The Awakening on American Family Radio. I'm Meeke Addison. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is The Awakening on American Family Radio. I'm Meeke Addison, in for Bishop Jackson, and it's a pleasure to stand in for such a warrior in the faith. And, it's good to fill in for someone who doesn't apologize. You know what I mean? And so it's always good, because this is what you're used to, just going in straight and not being concerned that you got to give a bunch of disclaimers and all those things. Sometimes the disclaimers are helpful. People can understand where you're coming from, but other times really it just becomes cumbersome to have to, and I'm not saying this and I'm not saying that. Look, the world doesn't waste a whole lot of time doing that. They have so inculcated their ideologies into common public thinking that there's no more need for disclaimers. They're just free to say and do whatever they want, and everybody else has to adjust and just kind of follow suit, right? While Christians are often standing around like, and I'm not this. No, I'm not saying I'm that. Like, just be bold. Be bold. We're talking about Mackenzie Scott, basically talking about the financing of wickedness and what we need to understand. That it's not just winning elections, because though we continue to win elections, you can clearly see that the culture remains largely unchanged. In fact, continues to decline. What is going on? What is going on? Well, there are radical ideologies that I would say are being pumped into the generation that is now, that the church often ignores. Oh, we don't have time for that. We have to, send them off to this. But the world understands how important it is to get the youngest among us and to work diligently to teach them, which that's supposed to be the job of Christian parents, that we're supposed to be teaching our kids diligently. It's not happening. And the world says, you're not going to do it? Fine, I'll do it for you. So they got programs, they got organizations who are willing to do it. And we sit back and we're just like, man, why is my kid suddenly my enemy? Well, number one, your kid is not suddenly your enemy. Your kid has been your enemy for a long time. You didn't notice it. When finally given the opportunity, it manifests and you see it. And now you're scratching your head. And how did your kid become your enemy? Because you allowed your kid to be indoctrinated, to receive destructive ideologies that became a part of his or her normal construct. Normal construct. They were your enemy while you were giving them cereal. They were your enemy while you're making the grits and cooking the bacon. And then all of a sudden they're going away to school and they can just show you to the fullest extent that, yeah, I don't believe what you say. I'm not down with that. That's not something that just happened. That's something that had already happened, but they were waiting for opportunity. And why? Because you've got organizations that even write curricula that are in our schools right now. And you wonder, how are these people doing this? How are they infiltrating? Well, because they're receiving funding. While we just think, we just got to get our candidate in. They understand, we got to get our candidate in. But even if we don't, we're shifting culture by changing ideologies. We're changing the way people think. And that's of greater importance because they're going to give their vote in the direction that their heart is, the direction that they think. And we miss this as Christians. We miss it. We leave a part of our fence, we leave a part of our wall unsecured. And what I'm trying to do today is to rally believers and say, you got to secure all of the walls. You got to guard the city. So that means that while we care and are involved in looking at what is happening politically speaking, we got to care about what's happening in the culture. We got to care about the indoctrination of children. Because the wicked understand this. Mackenzie Scott listing the 116 organizations that she's so far given 1.7 billion to. Again, I just will remind you, she's got at least 30 billion to give to. She says she wants to empty the safe. She says she wants to empty the safe. So we're looking at some of the organizations that she's chosen to give to. Not all of them are off the rails, not by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, not all of them are off the rails, but the ones that are seem to outnumber the ones that are not. And why is that? Because these people understand ideological bent. They understand the strong influence that is changing the way people think. You change the way somebody thinks and you change their behavior. You change their actions. And we have got to get this. She gave to an organization, the Estrella Lesbian Foundation for Justice, which this foundation notes on its grant application page that it's anti-criminalization work includes work on policing and prison abolition. So Mackenzie Scott is donating to organizations that support abolishing the police. Now, again, we can look at this as like a political fight. We just got to get our guy or gal in office. But here you have organizations that are working behind the scenes at a local level to not only change policy, but change sentiment. Change heart, change thinking. She gave to an organization, the Movement for Black Lives, not to be confused with Black Lives Matter. The Movement for Black Lives, which demands that prisons, police, and all other institutions that inflict violence on Black people must be abolished and replaced by institutions that value and affirm the flourishing of Black lives. Isn't it affirming the flourishing of Black lives for Black lives to be protected? In the hood context, isn't that good? Like, don't. And I mean, this has already been, talked about ad nauseum. But look, I grew up in the hood context. There's not a person in the hood who is trying to live or survive that doesn't understand the importance of law enforcement. That is a liberal luxury to talk about defunding the police. That's a liberal luxury. No, we don't need police officers. You've never lived in this context. And if you have and are now calling for the police to be defunded, maybe there's two options. You have had your ideology shift, right? Or you know that you're not going to have to live in the communities that will be the most adversely affected by what you're calling for. You don't, Don Lemon, right? You're not going to have to live there. But this is what Mackenzie Scott is giving to. And the reason I bring this up is not to look so much at her money as it is to look at the sentiment behind it and where the money is going. And I understand that at this point, there are Christians who are listening in and who are thinking, well, Meeke, we don't have billions of dollars, but that's not even really the question. The question is, what you do have you prayerfully asked the Lord to direct you in directing it? Are you led by your money or are you led by the Spirit of God? Are you just, are you really asking the Lord to show you how to make a difference with the resources that you have? And then I'll go you a step further here, because it's not even about billions. It's not about thousands. It's not about ones, fives, or tens. What are you doing with your time? What are you doing with what you know to be true about who God is with the generation that is now? And I'm very careful to not, call this generation the next generation, because it's too dismissive. It makes us feel like we got time. You don't have time. You don't have time. The culture continues to shift into this downturn, this decline, while the people of God are like, we have time. We've just got to work on this, and this will work itself out. But it's not, because while you leave it unattended, there are those who have a vested interest in picking up your scraps. You're not going to do anything with that? Well, fine, we'll take it. Mackenzie Scott now, in her blog post, which kind of outlined the organizations that she gave to, she also broke down the categories that she chose to give to. And I think it's interesting in looking at, the total amount of money that she's given to date. She broke it down. In the top tier was racial equity, $586 million. LGBTQ plus equity, $46 million. Gender equity, $133 million. Economic mobility, $399 million. Empathy and bridging divides, $55 million. Functional democracy, $72 million. Public health, $128 million. Global development, $130 million. Climate change, $125 million. So she put these areas together that this is where I want to focus. But this is what she said in her blog post, right? She says that there's no question in my mind that anyone's personal wealth is the product of a collective effort. Karl Marx would be so proud. It's like the product of a collective effort. Almost sounds like you didn't build that, right? People's quote unquote personal wealth, according to Mackenzie Scott, is the product of a collective effort and of social structures which present opportunities to some people and obstacles to countless others. So I give because there are some people that no matter how hard they try, no matter how hard they work, they'll never be able to earn and be successful because, well, they're not me. Do you know how condescending that is? Do you know how like that's so offensive. You're not me. So you'll never be able to, succeed the way that I have. Which really, I mean, and look, I'll be careful here, but the success here is, you married Jeff Bezos a year before y'all started Amazon in the garage. And look, there's a lot that goes into that. This is not a knock against the divorce settlement. But what I'm saying is you're up on a pretty high horse in declaring that I have had access to things. And in fact, she says that she talks about basically her privilege. And remember, these are like the buzzwords, right? She says, what fills me with hope is the thought of what will come if each of us reflects on what we can offer. Opportunities that flowed from the mere chance of skin color, sexual orientation, gender, or zip code may have yielded resources that can be powerful levers for change. So in other words, I only have this money because I am a white woman who is straight, who married a man who we live in a certain zip code, to say nothing of the fact that you started a company in your own garage and there is an incredible amount of support that comes from the wife when a husband has ventured out to do something. And even vice versa. None of that matters. What matters is that I'm falling on my sword here and saying that all that I have come by, all that I have accomplished is just by chance and happenstance. And so because of that, let me show you how good I am. I'm willing to give at least half of it away. But again, the focus is not even so much that. It's where is the money going? Christians, we are compelled to care about our kids and to care about the generation that is now. And it may not be about billions of dollars, but it certainly is about time and discipleship and investment and understanding that if we don't reach them now, they are already gone. All right. Thanks so much for listening to The Awakening. Until tomorrow, God bless.
The views and opinions expressed in this
Faith,
broadcast.
family, freedom. American Family Radio.